Welcome back, everyone. It's another episode of Global Card Collectors. And today I'm back with our old friend Justin, who has taken, let's say, just a very short sabbatical for very important reasons. How you doing, Justin?
I'm good. We can call it parental leave, I guess. Yeah, we
Nice.
about exactly 6 weeks ago yesterday, we had our second child. So yeah, a little bit hectic with a two-year old and a 6 week old in the house. But glad to finally, it's Thanksgiving weekend here in the States. So my parents are here. They're out with the 2.5-year-old, running around the yard right now. So they were able to give me a bit of time to jump on. And I've, missed being on here, missed talking cards. So I'm happy to be back.
Great, man. It's amazing to have you back. And we had planned this episode quite a while ago, in fact. And I think the first time we had locked in a time, you sent me a message. You're like, "Look, I can't do it. My partner's just gone into labor, so I think I'm out for the next couple of days." I'm like,
It was,
"It
yeah.
is what it is."
We were
But I
supposed
think
to
it's
do it on Saturday, October 18th, and on Friday, October 17th, my wife had our son. So yeah,
amazing.
minor inconvenience
Well,
for jumping.
you were always welcome to jump back on if you wanted to.
I'm not sure my wife agreed with that one.
I don't think it would have been awake either. I'm sure, like a brand new baby, just all of the stress and energy that comes with it. I remember I was completely exhausted and I couldn't think straight for at least a week. So,
Yeah.
yeah, well, congrats again. Congrats.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Anyway, we wanted to talk about that wonderful new Topps Chrome boxing card set that has finally come out. Like, I think it was 60 or 70 years in waiting for another Topps boxing card
The
set to come
last
out. Is
one
that
was
right?
51 ringside. So
Oh
yeah,
my God.
whatever math that is. What is that? 74 years? Is that right? I don't know. I have zero.
74
Math.
years.
74
Wow.
years. Is
Wow,
that
wow,
right?
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. So I guess one of the things was I was so hyped up about it. I wanted to buy a box. I wanted to do all sorts of things with that set of cards. And now that the hype has died down a bit, I think it's a really good chance for us to look at that set objectively and just kind of see what that set was like. A couple of things I really liked about the set. I definitely liked a number of the autos that you could find in the set. I
Mhm.
love that it was a licensed set by a big name card company.
Yeah.
I liked having parallels of famous boxers and seeing some really cool cards in that set. What were your initial thoughts when you saw, I guess, photos of the set, buddy?
The design is great. I think
Yeah.
aesthetically, Topps just knocked it out of the park. And I think that's, tying it into the larger hobby scene. I've noticed that, even with their unlicensed stuff that they've had in football and basketball, I find myself, since Fanatics took over, I've really enjoyed the Topps designs. So I'm
Mhm.
pretty excited here for, now they've got the licensing for basketball back. Football's coming here. I can't remember if it's next year. I think it's next year, or the following year. But I'm very, as much as I've been a little on the fence about this whole, Fanatics takeover of the hobby, like where I do think they've been strong is aesthetics with the cards. And I think that the Chrome boxing set, I really like the design. Um, I'm with you. Some of the parallels and autos that are in there, they've captured a lot of the big names, and I think that there's a lot of chase there. There's a lot of good chase there. If we're
Mhm.
getting into something negative, I think we've talked about this. The checklist is just massive, though.
Yes.
It's an extraordinarily large checklist, and for me, in my opinion, that's a little bit of a misstep, and maybe segues into something we might discuss at the end about boxing cards and the hobby more generally in their future. But I think here's the thing, right? The average sports fan, right, probably can name a few of the top boxers, right, and
Hmm.
could think, okay, it would be pretty cool to snag an auto or a nice, parallel or something to that effect of one of those guys. I think making that a little more attainable would have maybe been a good move on the part of Topps, because with this checklist is so massive, there's tons of guys that I've never heard of on there. I mean, I found myself kind of
Yes.
Googling around, and I follow boxing, I think, a little more closely than the average sports fan. So I just wonder if by creating such a large checklist and making it so challenging to pull some of those bigger names that people would know, that maybe that, I don't know, maybe it would have been a better idea to keep the checklist small at the first go round, at least to suck people in a bit. suck me in
I
too,
can
because when I see a checklist that large, just in general, I haven't bought a box yet. I've been part of that is I've been trying. People don't have it, right? I've at least tried to look for it and plot around. I have a couple friends who own card shops, and they said that now, like, we don't have any. We don't know if we'll get any. So finding it's been one issue, but the second issue is even if I found it, I don't know if I pull the trigger just because it's kind of like Prism Football, where the checklist is just so big. It's like, do I really want to spend the money on this, or do I want to kind of poach eBay for the singles I want? Which I do think that's this the Top Scrum boxing set lends itself well to that, because there are some, there's some good singles that I think you've already picked some up, haven't you, at really good prices. So I do think
That's
there's
exactly
opportunity for
right.
some cool cards there, but as far as buying a box, the checklist just scares me a little bit, to be honest.
And I completely agree with you on all fronts. I think the checklist is too big. What ended up happening was I was getting really itchy feet and I really wanted to buy a box. I think I contacted you. I was looking
You
online.
did.
I was looking at prices of boxes. In the meantime, some cards started popping up on ComC. So there was a whole bunch of cards, and so I started looking at them. Like you, really love the design. There's some really fun parallels in there. But at the same time, I started looking through the checklist, just going, man, there are so many faces here that I do not know, and I
Mhm.
know nothing about them. So if I were to buy a box, I would be probably stuck with a bunch of boxes that I don't know and don't appreciate and don't value. So why don't I start looking for singles instead? And
Yeah.
I think I probably found one of the singles that I really wanted. So the guy that I've been wanting from the set, the name that kind of stuck out to me besides Tyson, besides Mayweather, besides even someone like Jake Paul or
Mhm.
Garcia, was this Australian boxer who is literally fighting next week. His name is Jayo Pitaya, and I think I've talked about him a couple of times.
You
I've
have.
mentioned him a couple of times. So I actually have his. I think it's called the Ringside Parallel, which I think are the nicer parallel cards of the set. And I got the gold. I got the gold card of that. So just let me quickly show you because I don't have it in
Yes,
person because I
please.
bought it online. And uh, and when I bought it online, I think I picked it up for about $25. And as soon as I bought it online, because I bought it on ComC, I
Okay.
I sent it straight to PSA because I want to get it
Nice.
graded because it's a gold card. It's numbered to 50. I think it'll look lovely in a slab. And so this is the card here. So
That
that's
is
Jayo
sick.
Patai there. Isn't that
That is
cool?
sick.
So
Yeah, that's
that's
a great.
so
That's
that's
what I
that
mean.
yeah
Great looking cards.
yeah that's the matchroom parallel. So that's numbered to 50. Hold on, sorry, the lighting's going off there. But a really cool
That
looking
is
card, and
nice.
I can't wait to get it back in person, man. And it's one of my very favorite boxers, probably my favorite boxer that's currently fighting at the moment. He's a real pleasure to watch. You should definitely check out some of his videos. He's great.
And what did that run you off ComC for that card?
So I think I bought it for the guy was initially asking 40. I sent him an offer of like 20. And then we settled it at I think 27. I want to say I can't remember now. It's been a while,
You
but
cannot beat that. $27.
no, no, 27
That's a
bucks for
great
no,
card.
number to 50. And I think I looked up comps on 130 point as well, and they were going for about that from 25 to $30. So I did pretty well, like right in the middle. Got the card. I mean, sight unseen, just send it straight to grading. So it's going to be in a nice slab. It's going to be great. It's going to be a really nice piece of my boxing PC, and definitely a box I value and appreciate. So I've got him. I've obviously he's going to be next to David here,
Yeah,
our Kiwi boxer. So
the
I've got a
Tourminator.
couple of yeah, that's right. The Tour man, he's great. I like the Tourminator. He's a great fighter. So just another Pacific Island boxer that I really like. So I'm with you. I think this set for me, it's about trying to snag singles online. So I'm gonna keep looking for singles of Tyson, of Mayweather, of other boxers because I do like that Matchroom parallel set that they have because it has this nice background color to it. It's got a classic boxing card look.
And I think it's really, the first opportunity for modern collectors to kind of get involved in collecting boxing and kind of, just I bring up the price point that you got that at just to illustrate that there is going to be some opportunities for people to get in on boxing cards, modern collectors that are interested to get in on boxing cards at really low prices at this point, right? Because, let's be honest, the demand for guys outside of Tyson, outside of, Mike Tyson, Tyson Fury, Mayweather, Jake Paul, even, right? Because I saw some of his stuff out of that set actually sold for exceptionally high prices.
Yes.
Um, but outside of those major guys, right? There's very good fighters that are in that checklist that you're going to be able to get very good cards of for well under $50. So it's a good opportunity for modern collectors that have an interest in boxing to maybe get in on some of this stuff and see if that can build a little bit of interest. But yeah, I think it's a good look. I'm glad it's out there. I hope it's the first of many. I would just say in the future, maybe, hoping the only real knock I have is, hoping for a bit of a smaller checklist.
I'm with you, and I guess I want to compare that set to that Panini Combat Anthology set that I was showing you a couple of cards of, and I think that they've managed it a little bit better because I think they understand that people in the general public don't know that
Hmm.
wider list of boxers. And so what they did was they made a set of cards that covers boxers, MMA fighters, and WWE wrestlers as well.
Hmm.
So they call that the Panini Combat Anthology. So you've got your Mike Tysons in there, you've got your other big name boxers in there, and they still have all of those beautiful cards from Panini that we like. So one of the big chase cards in that set is the Mike Tyson Kaboom card. So,
Hmm.
everyone's talking about a Kaboom card and putting Mike Tyson on a Kaboom card, that's just instant big money,
And
big
that's what
chase
Panini,
card.
yeah, and that's what Panini has going for it a little bit right now too. Is they still have and you guys did a special. I know you and John talked about the Panini era a little bit, and
Hmm.
one thing that I really think is true of the Panini era is there's certainly a lot of stuff that's just not great in terms of cards. There's some failed designs. There's too many inserts, too many parallels. But you have your kabooms, your downtowns, some of these inserts that are gonna, I think, in 30 years, be talked about as iconic for collectors who got in around this time. So, like you said, with this set, being able to put Mike Tyson on a kaboom,
Yeah.
iconic fighter, what is the popular insert of the day. It's like that's really really cool. And again, like I think you raise a good point too. And I'll be honest, I did not know anything about that set until you sent me that Tyson Kaboom in WhatsApp, and I was trying to find some time to look into it a bit. I think that concept is really cool, right? Because there's a handful of wrestlers, a handful of MMA fighters, and a handful of boxers people are going to know, probably in that order, to be honest. Like wrestling, MMA,
Yes.
probably more so than boxing right now.
Yes.
So being able to integrate those three, I think, presents a more interesting checklist because you're going to have more big names across those three sports. With boxing right now, part of the issue is just the sport itself is not as popular. Though I do think it's maybe a little more so now than it was 2 or 3 years ago. I think
Hmm.
boxing's back a little bit, but still not widely popular across the audience, at least here in America. So there just aren't that many boxers to fill out a large checklist. But when you combine boxing with MMA and with WWE, then now you do have a lot of recognizable names in there. So I agree with you. I think from that perspective, Panini did a good job with that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think moving forward, maybe Tops will probably look at the way that the market for this first set has softened a bit because it is easier to pick up some of these cards at decent prices, I think.
Hmm.
I'm not sure what the boxes prices are, but I think I want to say initially it was like 300 to 350 US for a box. Is that correct?
I don't know. I honestly am not sure. That sounds like it would be about in that range, but I can't say for certain.
But I'll definitely be looking into seeing if the box prices drops, I might pull the trigger then. But I think I'm with you in the sense that because the checklist is so large, why would you want to try and gamble
Yeah.
on getting a boxer that even just getting a base card of that person might
Yeah.
be all you get. So you might as well go online and try and find it on Fanatics Live or on ComC or somewhere else or eBay and pick up your card there.
But full transparency, that's how I collect in general anyway. I don't buy
Hmm.
much in the way of, I mean,
Yeah.
at this point, I probably buy maybe 3 or 4 boxes a year. So I mostly do that with anything at this point. But this would have been an exception if the checklist, and it still
Me
might be.
too.
I'm not gonna
Me
lie. If I
too.
find a box of this, if my buddy down here at Brian at BWA Cards is able to get a box in there, would I potentially pick one up as a spur of the moment impulse buy? Yes, of course, because that's what we do sometimes. Do I think that'd be the best decision? Probably not, but it's there's no such thing as a not fun rip though, right? As long as you go in knowing what you're going to do, being strategic about it and saying, look, I'm prepared to lose this money for the sake of this experience, then it's fine. But it's not something I do often. This would just be a little bit of an exception because, like you said, 74 years between boxing sets, it would be cool to rip a box of that, initial set. There's something about that I do think would be pretty cool.
Definitely, especially with all of these iconic boxes, it's going to be a point that I want to make a little bit later on in our chat too. I think cards of these iconic boxes that are licensed, that have their autograph on it, that are numbered, there's some value and validity to that too, because
Yeah.
there's a boxer that I'm going to be talking about in a little while who doesn't really have many iconic cards, and so it's a tragedy in many ways. But maybe one of these new sets can bring out some cards with his face on it, with his likeness on it, which would be awesome. But I'm kind of jumping the gun a little bit.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear who you have in mind. Which of your guys you're tying that to?
Nice. Anyway, shall we get started in the I guess in the second
Right.
half of our little episode? So when we were planning this, we looked at boxing cards in general. Like, well, if we're going to talk about the set, we can only talk about it for a couple of minutes. Let's jump in and see if we can talk about something else. And so we decided to come up with a theme of the bad boys of boxing. And there are a few. In fact, there are many. But
Yeah,
I
we had
think
to
it
narrow
just
it
gave us
down.
we had to narrow it down. And there are a few boxes that we really like, and we've talked about a few times, but we didn't want to be too repetitive. Like, there's some other boxes that we could have mentioned, but I just wanted to find a few different names myself. There's still one staple who I think you have to mention on my side, obviously,
Yeah.
and on yours too. So, would you like to go first, mate? Do you want to just lead us off with your first staple?
Sure. Yeah. And, anybody who's watched me on this channel or even any channel I think I've jumped on, I always talk about Jack Johnson. And, we, like Will said, we're trying to diversify a bit. But when Will said, hey, why don't we do the bad boys of boxing? I'm like, dude, we cannot do this episode and not talk about Jack Johnson because
100%.
he was now, of course, in that era of boxing, late 19th, early 20th century, there were other guys, that you could have picked as well because boxing was basically only comprised of bad boys at that time. But
Yeah.
hard to find anybody that was more at the forefront of attention in America at that time, early 20th century. I would say boxing, but really sport in general, than Jack Johnson. And we've talked about him a lot on here that, what makes Jack Johnson stand out is he was the first black heavyweight champion. And of course, that was the title in sport in the early 20th century. So when he took the heavyweight title in 1908, this was a really big deal. Now, it would have been a big deal no matter who Jack Johnson was, because this was a black man taking what, white America saw as a white man's position. But it was an even bigger deal because of who Jack Johnson was.
That's right.
Jack Johnson, and we recommended it a million times. I'm going to recommend it again. Unforgivable Blackness, right? PBS documentary. Watch it. It details, all of Jack Johnson's life and his, the reason he was so disliked. But I mean, this guy, at a time when black men couldn't date white women, he was out there with all the white women. Right, he was boisterous. He was. I mean, it wasn't just one. I mean, he was. He was getting around. He was doing what he pleased with whom he pleased. He was out. He was visible. He was. If you watch highlights of him, the famous Jim Jeffries fight in 1910, where Jeffries came out of retirement to supposedly be the great white hope and take the title back from Johnson. In a fight Johnson did win, setting off a bunch of race riots actually in the U.S. Johnson's sitting there taunting the crowd. He's trying to get him to come at. He was unapologetically right, great, and who he was, and he definitely, I think, would classify as a bad boy. He did end up paying a pretty heavy price for this, even though the charges were kind of trumped up for, transporting white women across state lines. They got him on the Mann Act and ended up having to serve time in prison. Well, first he actually left the country to avoid serving prison time for a good chunk of his prime, then came back and served the prison time and wasn't quite the same after that as a fighter. But at no point was Jack Johnson ever really apologetic, right?
Amazing.
He lived a very, out there life, and he was who he was. And you know what? I think having become a very big Jack Johnson collector, I get interesting feedback on my Jack Johnson posts on Instagram. And some of that is where I've had people message me and say, look, I used to collect Jack Johnson, but then I learned more about him and I don't like him, so now I don't collect him. Fair enough. I mean,
Fair enough.
he was certainly morally ambiguous in a sense, to say the least. But you know, you've got to remember part of that was driven by a desire not to be pushed around, and a desire not to kind of back down from racial pressure. So I think, yeah, Jack Johnson was not a perfect human being, as I don't think any of us are, but putting him in the context of the time, right, a lot of what he did can be seen as maybe a very you know, a very explicit rejection of racial norms of the time. And I think that makes him very important. And maybe more so than some of the other guys we talk about, maybe I'm trying to say that with his, bad boy image, there may have been a deeper purpose to it as well. But, but of course,
And
I got to
such
show.
a trailblazer in many ways,
Yeah,
It's
yeah, I,
the first of his kind, and like you said, he's out there in the public eye as the heavyweight champion of the world. Like that is the title to get. Like you're not going to get those kinds of accolades as the lightweight champion of the world or the
well, no, and
featherweight
that's
champion of the world. It's the title to have. Like you are the biggest, baddest man on the planet, and you're black in a white man's world, and he did not apologize for it. It's incredible.
yeah. And there were I mean, Joe Gans became the world's lightweight champ in 1906. What was it? George Dixon became the featherweight champ in 1890. So these were black men who had come before him and won titles,
Mm-hmm.
but like you said, it's different. The heavyweight title, I mean, just to put context on it at that time, the man holding the heavyweight title was a bigger star in sport than I would say almost any baseball player. You may get an argument like Ty
Mm-hmm.
Cobb or something like that, but Jack
Sure.
Johnson would have been on par with the biggest baseball stars in America in that time. So that's a big deal, right? Um, but I've got I have to do it
So
well.
I know you're gonna. I know you're gonna. You have
I,
to.
I have a new one in here though. Actually, I've got
Great.
my
Great.
five favorite Jack Johnson cards here that I'm going to show real quick, but I won't spend too much time on all of them. But I got a new one here that's pretty cool. I haven't shown this on any channels yet, so I'll tell a little story about it when it comes up too. But I've shown this one. This was one from this year's
That's right.
National 1912
That's
Cohen
right.
Weenan Jack Johnson. And what I like about this one, well, many things, but it's the black back, which is a little bit more scarce. And this is PSA 4. There's, I think, three PSA 5s, and I think there might be a 6 out there, but this is pretty close. This is one of the higher graded copies of this
Wow.
card. So that's pretty cool. I've got, I've shown this one many times. This is one of my favorite pickups last year, his rookie card, the '09 Ogdens.
Do you
These
think that
next,
that Ono Ogden's is the probably the most iconic ones? Is this like the rookie card of his?
I
Do you
think
think
the
so?
Ogdens is the most iconic just because it checks the right boxes, right? It's a rookie card. And it's by the standard of Jack Johnson card, it's pretty high pop. It's in the hundreds. So it's accessible. It's not horribly expensive. So yeah, I think that this, or maybe some of his T218 cards from 1910, the front view and side view, which I've shown before, those are
Yes.
also kind of pretty iconic as well. When people ask me,
Beautiful.
because increasingly people will reach out to me on Instagram and say, "Hey, I want to get a Jack Johnson card. What should I get?" I always kind of say, if you want something that's iconic that people are going to recognize at a price point that's pretty good to get into, one of the T218 cards, or if you want to go up to just that little bit next level, then it's the rookie card. But to me, those are the ones that, are the most visibly recognizable Jack Johnson cards. Um,
Great.
I'll show these two at once for the sake of time because these are actually my two favorites. I got both these this
They're
year. This is
great,
T
dude.
20
They're great.
227 Miners Extra Back Jack Johnson, and this is the E75 1910 American Caramel. These are my two favorite Jack Johnson cards I own. They
Agreed.
may make
Agreed.
another appearance if we do an end of the year show as well because these are both pickups this year.
Yeah, good.
But this is the new one, and I got this off Collector Investor Auctions actually a few days after my son was born. So it's very new. This is a
Wow.
1915
Wow.
Susini Jack Johnson. It's a Cuban release from 1915, and this set is gigantic. Hundreds and hundreds of cards, but mostly non-sport cards. There are not a whole lot of athletes in this set. There's some baseball players, couple boxers, that sort of thing. But Jack Johnson would be one of the very biggest. Like if you Google this set and look at the highlights of the set, Jack Johnson is one of the very 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 biggest cards in this set. This one's pretty scarce. This one is a sub 50 pop between PSA and SGC, And I think this is one of, I know it doesn't probably come across super clear in the camera, but this is one of the most lifelike Jack Johnson images I've ever seen on any of his cards. So when this came up, I had to bid strong on it and get it. But this is a new ad. This is the most recent ad to the Jack Johnson PC. It's a SGC3. So had to bust that one out because I love that. I love it's a Cuban release too because that is so cool to show kind of the global reach of Jack Johnson at that time, right? Because he's in
Wow.
sets, in so many countries during that time.
Yeah, very true. That's cool, man. And I think for those of us who are probably listening for the first time, go back and watch some of the earlier episodes where Justin really does break down all of Jack Johnson's cards that he has in his collection, besides these newbies, of
Yeah.
course. But it's very clear that he's one of your favorites, and you piece him, and you've got
He,
a really fantastic collection, mate.
he's my favorite guy across all sports to collect. I have 11 Jack Johnson cards and bidding on another one as we speak. So we'll see how that goes.
Amazing, amazing, great, man. So I guess running with that same theme of bad boys, you're looking at one iconic boxer to another, who we've both talked about at length on this channel. And if you got to have a bad boys list, maybe he's first on that list. It's this guy. It's one of my favorite boxers of all time. It's Iron
Oh,
Mike Tyson. So this is a Mike Tyson Leaf card. I just had to have a card with his auto on it. And one of the interesting things about Mike Tyson cards is that because he's a boxer in a time where cards were pretty scarce and the companies that were making them weren't very well known, I have really found it quite tough. And this is probably me just jumping the gun a little bit with my other two boxes, but I'll probably mention it with them as well. I found it quite tough to find some iconic cards of theirs. So Mike Tyson basically has one major card that I
mhm.
think if you were to collect him, it would be that card, and it's the 1986 Panini Super Sport. It's actually is it a I want to say it's a
It's a
sticker, or
sticker.
is that right? It's a
Yep,
sticker.
it's a sticker.
So and it's made by the Italian wing of Panini, so the original home of Panini cards, and so that sticker sells for big money. And to try and find that one is not that hard to find. It's hard to find at a good price, I think.
Yeah.
So
Well, I don't think they
so
have listed. They exist at a good price exactly.
that's right.
I don't
So
even.
that card's
As
got even the low grade ones are going to set you back a good chunk of change, and I think those PSA 10s go for probably about as much as any boxing card out there, right?
definitely, definitely. Unless you're talking about some ultra rare like Red Sun Jack Johnson or something, anything with a normal population, that Tyson and PSA 9 or 10 is going to be very competitive in terms of what it goes for.
That's right. So that's the most iconic card of Mike Tyson is the 86 Panini card. What I will say is because there aren't that many, I guess, boxing cards out there that were kind of recognized. There's nothing that seems majorly iconic. Like there's a ringside Mike Tyson card, which is pretty nice, and but doesn't put you back too much money. But that one again is not super iconic as well. I think, to be honest, there are probably three cards that I would mention and that I think are probably memorable Mike Tyson cards. And one is also from Leaf. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's the Mike Tyson autograph card, and it's of Mike Tyson boxing. Do you remember that game that people used to play?
Yeah, yep,
So
yep,
there's
yep. The Mike
so
Tyson
there's an
knockout.
Mike Tyson knockout. So there's an image of the cover of that game, and
Yeah,
then it's got his auto on it. So I think that one was super iconic when that Leaf card first came out, and that one was going for a good chunk of change, and it's still quite expensive. So there's that one. Plus, I think it's literally from these two sets that we talked about, and I think that's why those two sets are important as flagships for hopefully the future. So for that Topps Chrome set that came out, there's an insert set in there called Ring Generals, and that has numbered cards that are autoed. And the Mike Tyson ones are selling for like the low thousands. I think the
wow.
most recent sale I saw was about $700, and yet you get the numbered ones and they're up in the thousands. So there's that card there, the Ring Generals auto card of Mike Tyson. Maybe an excuse for us to buy that box.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And the other one that I did share with you was the is the 2025 Panini Kaboom Mike Tyson card, and that one is comfortably selling over $1,000. Obviously, being a Kaboom from Panini, those things just they're just instant hits. They know that that's going to be a big dollar card, and so I saw a guy on a Facebook page, Sports Card Nonsense Facebook page. He has the only graded PSA 10 of that card, and I
Wow.
think he's probably going to sell it for between $5,000 and $10,000. I don't know if he's going to be able to sell it, but I guess we're going to have to wait and see.
I mean,
Yeah.
but here's the thing with Tyson, like we've said before, right? It's like there's two things that I throw in on that. One, with his popularity, right? Like for guys in our generation, right, growing up, that was the baddest dude on the planet.
Hundred
Like
percent.
like there was nobody scarier, nobody more intense, nobody more intimidating, especially than pre-prison Mike Tyson. I mean, because you and I are just old enough to we where we still remember pre-prison Tyson, right?
Yes.
And just that was just a dude, right? And you take that combined with his, integration into pop culture. He is an icon beyond sports, and part of that goes with his later life. And this will go to somebody that I'm going to talk about here in a bit too. Is a redemptive arc is always something that people can get into, and Mike Tyson's redemption arc throughout the last few years has been really incredible to follow. And, I think that also contributes to his popularity because you have this guy that we remember as like superhuman from our youth. And then
Yes.
watching him kind of, achieve this redemptive arc later and his integration into pop culture, it's just like he just the recipe is there for somebody who is going to be, popular in the hobby. And I think it's cool how companies have found more ways to integrate him into sets, Leaf, Panini, Tops, whatever.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. I think the redemptive arc is one of the best things I've seen from a sports person. And like many others, you watch him go into prison when he comes out of prison and he's saying all sorts of crazy stuff and
Yeah.
kind of, like the Lennox Lewis fight and some of the things he was saying to him and the reporters are just like, oh man, you're completely off the rails. But I think when have you ever read his book Undisputed Truth?
No,
It is
you
it
put
is
it on my
it is
radar, and I need to.
I know you don't have much time, but when you do have a minute, you
Yeah.
you should
Right.
absolutely do it. It's one of the most compelling stories of any sports person I've ever read in my life, and it was so great that Spike Lee was, I think, either Spike Lee read it or he saw him talking in a club, and then basically that's what started that Broadway show of his, and I
Yeah.
think that started his redemption as well. It wasn't even about becoming a person in the public eye; it was about him dealing with a lot of the loss that he had in his
Yeah.
life, and basically just having time to reflect on his life and what he is as a person, and it's been amazing to watch. It really has.
I'm excited for the day when I can slide that into my reading list above, healthy sleep habits for a happy baby by Mark Weisbluth, which is what I'm currently reading right now. So it's
Awesome.
phases of life are very interesting, but I would certainly, all things equal, be looking forward to the day when I can slide that into my reading list. He's an intriguing figure, and you have recommended that book very highly to me. So one of these days, once we get through this, chaos of the newborn phase, might be nice to be able to jump into that.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, those are two of our favorites. Obviously, we've mentioned them multiple times on the channel. We're in new territory now, and we're going to talk about a couple more. So, do you want to hit us with your next bad boy of boxing?
I think so because I mean, let's stay on the theme of redemption, and then we can go to the other side of the coin with the other guy I picked, maybe.
Okay,
But
okay,
let's stick with
all
the theme
right.
of redemption. And you know what? The guy I'm going to bring up here is George Foreman. Now, for a lot of people who are maybe a little younger or haven't looked into George Foreman's earlier part of his life, you remember a Christian minister who's selling, those indoor barbecue grills, the Foreman grills, right? Big happy guy on the infomercials with his apron on, and that's the George Foreman that, quite honestly, I grew up with as well.
Hmm.
So it wasn't until I watched, and man, I'm trying to remember how young I would have been. There was an ESPN special on Muhammad Ali, and it wasn't When We Were Kings. It was a different one. And I
Okay.
can't remember the name of it to save my life, but it was an extent. It was like 2 hours, and I must have been in like fifth grade or something. So my memory of this is a little bit fuzzy because fifth grade was an extremely long time ago now, like 30 years. But what I remember is they chronicled the Rumble in the Jungle, And of course, that was in 74 when Ali fought George Foreman. And they portrayed Foreman as just this dude who was just this big, mean bully, like grumpy. Like, I'm like,
Bully.
George Foreman, like
Awful.
this is the guy who's out there, he's a minister. He's selling barbecue grills. This guy wasn't what? This can't be the same dude. Sure enough, you look into George Foreman's early days. I mean, he was a street criminal in his teen years. Eventually, kind of turned around from that a bit, and started working some manual labor jobs, that sort of thing. And originally, who he really idolized, Jim Brown. And when thinking, because obviously he was a big guy in stature, and he was kind of thinking about pursuing football. But he got some advice that, hey, why don't you maybe take up boxing, get into boxing, try that. So he did. He trained, and obviously, Foreman kind of burst on the scenes as a boxer in 68 in Mexico City when he won the gold medal in the Olympics. And so, even though, I mean, obviously he kind of put crime behind him in his teens, this was still a guy where when you kind of look at his persona from his early fighting days, pre, 1980s, this was a very intense, very mean, just very, a dude you did not want to cross, right? Because if you look at the kind of the background of Rumble in the Jungle, Ali's out, kind of mingling with the locals, like trying to rally support, kind of goofing around with George Foreman, and Foreman's having none of it. Foreman looks like he wants to, sit there and just pound everybody in his path. And, you know, it's interesting though, because I can't remember what year, but it was off the top of my head. I looked it up, but I, still have the sleepless fog in my head from, being up. Yeah, not a good night for our 6-week-old last night. But would have been, I believe, like early 80s that George Foreman had a conversion experience to Christianity. And that changed his life. He became a minister. And I think that's a pretty cool part of his story, that he, had that kind of transformation. And, he pursued a lot of interests along those lines, right? He actually became a minister of a church and, very much involved in the Christian walk there. And so he does this, right? And throughout, the 80s and in the early 90s, he kind of makes a comeback, right? Like George Foreman, now remember, he first wins the heavyweight title in 1973 when he beats Joe Frazier, right? 1973, okay? Wins a gold medal in 1968. He comes back into boxing, and in 1994 he actually wins the heavyweight title again at age 45, and he is still on record as the oldest man to hold the world's heavyweight title. So we take this arc where he's 15, he's a criminal, everything like that, gets into boxing, he's very successful still, though, and admittedly, in reading a little bit about him, still not a very happy person, still very angry, has this conversion to Christianity, but still, right, like even though he's kind of now a little more at peace, still very successful in the ring after that, at age 45 to win the heavyweight title, and obviously a great deal of commercial success as well. But it was interesting to me to just see kind of the trajectory of his life, to see this once criminal turned very angry, aggressive person, to this more person who's a bit more at peace. But still, throughout that, the consistent thread is he was very successful in the ring, right, across the board, across his life, to win the heavyweight championship of the world. 21 years apart. That's pretty amazing, right? Nobody has done that other than George Foreman to this point. But you also mentioned, Will, that Tyson doesn't have a whole lot of cards. Both guys I mentioned, Foreman and then the next guy I'm going to talk about, they don't have many cards either. But Foreman does have one card that is on my want list. Is his 1973 Panini rookie. Great looking card. It's just George Foreman just sitting there, blank background, like pumping the chest out like this.
Yes.
That card, I've been underbidder on a couple of those. It's been on my watch list. It's just, right one at right price. It's one of those things where I've missed a couple right ones but like $1 or something getting sniped on eBay. And then a lot of the buy it now is just a little bit too expensive for the card that I'm looking at. So, but eventually I will add that to my collection. As far as other Foreman cards, there were none that were really on my radar until I started poking around. There's a 1983 Olympic Heroes set that has a couple cool looking cards of George Foreman, and I think he has 2 in there. One with like a yellow border, one with a blue border that are pretty cool. But if you're talking about a George Foreman card, I mean, it's, to me, that 73 Panini rookie, it is just a cool card, iconic pose. So that's what I would say about George Foreman. I mean, I think he's very, very cool story, very, very interesting guy.
I think I've even seen that card as well. Is he got the mini fro in that one too?
Yes, he's got the fro going on, the
Yeah, it's
stash, and he
great,
just
dude.
sits there pumped.
It's
That's
a
awesome.
great looking card. Yeah, yeah, I know exactly which one you're talking about. So with my, I guess my next bad boy, it was a little bit of a stretch because I think it was more like he was a villain persona rather than actually a bad guy. So my guy is Hands of Stone. So it's a guy we know as Roberto Duran, a real wonderful boxer, just a kind of guy who, when you look at his story, he basically came from nothing, like a kid on the streets, and basically used his grit and his just never give up attitude for a long part of his career to become the champion of the world. And so he's most famous for beating Sugar Ray Leonard in an
Mhm.
epic boxing match, and he deserved to win that fight big time. And by all accounts, he punched hard, but in that fight, he was at the absolute peak of his boxing powers. Unfortunately for him, he accepted a rematch, I think, far too soon, and he was well overweight. He couldn't even make weight, so he had to cut weight. One of the famous guys who cut weight to fight for the title, and you could see him like on television shows in the meantime, and he basically, I think, enjoyed his moment as heavyweight champion of the world. In the meantime, Sugar Ray Leonard was probably in the gym the next day, just like, I want to get my title back, I want to get it back, I'm going to get it back. And he was full of determination to win that fight. Whereas I think Duran was just like, I've gotten to the mountaintop. This is all I need to do. I'm set for life, all these kinds of things.
Mhm.
And so when he came back for the rematch, he was clearly underdone. And inside 2 rounds, Sugar Ray Leonard basically beat him so bad that he had the famous line, "No mas," which means no contest. I'm done. And and that basically ended his career. He had other fights after that, but I think, to be honest, a lot of those were for a paycheck. I heard a story about when he passed away, actually. So before he passed, Sugar Ray Leonard actually flew to be with him and to talk with him, and he was bedridden, and they basically he was just like, you are my hero, and Sugar Ray
Mhm.
Leonard is like, well, actually, you were the motivation for me to be a fighter, and it was just amazing
Wow.
how these two very different boxers, who one has this pretty boy hero image,
Yeah.
whereas this other guy just seemed to naturally fill that villain role and was incredible. Like, what a fighter. Anyway, he's a boxer who I just wanted to, I guess, recognize and just see if there were any cards of his out there. And sadly, as we've both hinted at, around that era, so basically from the 70s to even basically up until today,
Yeah,
there
now.
haven't really been any great well-known boxing sets. There are two sets of cards that he's in that are selling. One is the 1991 KO set, KAYO
Mhm.
set. And that one, I think you can pick it up in a PSA slab for probably the price of the slab. You could probably get it for 25 bucks. And the other one is a 1991 AW sports card as well. And again, very, very cheap. And they're okay looking cards, but they're not great. So I'm hoping that in time, that top set will somehow be able to get rights to his likeness and be able to produce some licensed boxing cards of his that are numbered or something, because he deserves to be celebrated
For
and
sure.
memorialized. He's such an icon of boxing. In fact, he's one of Mike Tyson's heroes. Like,
Mhm.
Tyson talks about a big list of boxers that he looked up to, and he basically says my boxing style was, I modeled it off basically off Roberto Duran, just like this constant movement and just never stopping going forward and just have really heavy hands and just beat someone's heart as I could.
Yeah. No, I think with Roberto Duran, I've gone back and actually much kind of at your urging looked at some highlights of his, and yeah, he was a bad dude because I think you're just a little bit older than me, and you remember Roberto Duran fighting as to where I kind of enter in the Tyson era.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, like my first entries, like, Tyson, Holyfield, Lennox Lewis, Riddick Bowe, some of those guys,
Yeah.
Foreman, I
Yep.
remember him
Yep.
winning in '94. So but man, like he has been a cool guy to kind of learn about a little bit. Like you said, a very interesting personality. So that was a lot of stuff I didn't know too. So I'm glad that you chose him.
Yeah, great, man. So I just want, I guess I just wanted to, just see. Hopefully, one day we might be able to get some more iconic cards. If it's maybe find a like one of those on card autos that has been DNA certified of his would be kind of fun. That would be worth a lot of money, I assume, but might
I
not
would
be
think
too bad to pursue.
so. Yeah, no, that would be pretty cool. And yeah, like you said, like Duran is a guy who's maybe a bit lost to time. So I think and that's one of the cool things about collecting is, some of these fighters, I've said the same thing about, guys like George Dixon and Joe Gans, Sam Langford in the early 20th century. It's, these are guys that if not for collecting, might their stories may be lost to time. So I think
That's right.
it's, kind of a cool way of keeping history alive. At least that's how I justify it to my wife, saying I'm doing something useful, right?
Yeah,
This is an
yeah.
important part
That's
of keeping history alive and passed along.
all right. Do you want to give us your third and final bad boy of boxing, bud?
This might be the baddest dude too, and that is Mr. Sonny Liston.
I
Um,
think he might be. I think he
that
might be.
so it's so funny, right? Because when I say the name Sonny Liston, a lot of times the first thing that comes to people's minds are those fights in '64 and '65, where Liston loses to Ali, especially in '64, where that's
Yeah,
Cassius Clay as he was at the time, his first kind of bursting onto the scene. Cassius Clay wasn't given a chance in that fight. He has the iconic win, the iconic reaction in the ring afterwards. But thinking back, right, there's a reason that Cassius Clay win was such a big deal. That put him on the scene. That was such a significant event in sports history, and that's because nobody thought that Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, was going to win that fight. And there's a reason for that. Sonny Liston was viewed as unbeatable, right?
yeah,
He was that dude. He was a bad man, right? And he spent most of his youth, in street gangs, living a complete life of crime, right? Like it wasn't like Foreman where he dabbled in it for a year or two. I mean, this was his life. This dude was
that's
a
right.
career criminal and actually went a bit too far down that road and landed himself in federal prison for 5 years. And that is where he picked up boxing. Actually, that's where he learned to box, was in prison. And what's funny about this dude, man, is a lot of people, you put me in prison for 5 years, I'll admit it. I'm probably coming out of there traumatized saying, oh my God, that was all. Sonny Liston came out of there. He said that, I read that he never said a bad word about prison. Like, he gave me 3 square meals, place to sleep. It's like, that's a hard, but he probably didn't have any, I mean, he was such a bad dude, right? Like, I don't figure that he got harassed a whole lot in prison either. So maybe that helped the situation. But I
That's
mean,
really-
legitimately, and I mean, you talk about ties to the mafia, both that we
that's
know
right.
about and maybe the even
That's right.
deeper ties that we suspect. I remember
Yeah.
when he lost the fight in '64 to Ali, there was even
Mhm.
suspicion that the fight was
That's
fixed.
right. I was going to
Now they
say
had
that.
another fight in '65, and when Ali knocked him out in the first round, people were kind of like, well, probably not. This Ali guy might actually be pretty good too. Um, but yeah, but he was that, he was viewed as that much as of kind of an underworld figure, so to speak. Liston was, but just legitimately, and I'll say this: I was thinking about this in preparation for the episode, right? Like, Ali obviously was a superior boxer by that point in their careers, and
Hmm.
probably if you did at their peaks, Ali still was probably a better boxer. But I'll wager you put those two guys out in an alley behind the boxing ring, I'm taking
Yeah.
Liston all day.
Yeah.
I'm taking
That's
Liston
right.
in a street
That's
fight.
right.
Like
That's right.
Ali was an excellent athlete. I mean, I'm not taking away from Ali's toughness, but I'm taking Liston in a street fight all day against most. Now, what I'd like to see is a Liston George Foreman street fight, right? There,
Oh
that
man.
would have been something to witness. But even then, man, I don't know. You'd probably have to really sell me on why I should pick anybody but Liston in a street fight. But yeah, I mean, this was definitely a bad boy, but also a great champion too. I mean, unfortunately, there's no redemptive arc here because he died under pretty shady circumstances in
That's
1970.
right. That's right.
So there's potential foul play suspected there, but not confirmed. Is kind of what I read. Very, um, kind of sketchy to say the least. So there's no redemptive arc in the Liston story, unfortunately, but he was a great champion. And, I think he should, be remembered as a guy who did have those, great years as a fighter and not just a guy who watched Muhammad Ali's career, right? I think that's kind of a little bit unfortunate. Um,
That's right.
but he does so he has a couple of cards, and I'll be honest, I his rookie card is a 1962 Swedish released Swedish record
That's right.
journal. He
Hmm.
shares the card with Dave Cheney. If you're asking who Dave
Hmm.
Cheney is, I really don't know.
No.
Somebody who's been lost to history. It's a dual card. I've seen it sold with it connected, and I've seen the Liston card sold where it's been hand
By
cut.
itself.
Um,
Hmm.
I like the look of the hand cut better, but I don't like the idea of it being hand cut, if that makes sense. So if I were to ever get that card, I would probably get it attached, to be honest, even though I don't care about Dave Cheney being on the card, to be honest.
Yeah.
I do not love that card. I'll be honest. For me,
Okay.
that's not one that's on the top of my wish list. The Liston card that I like is a 1966 Panini release where it shows Liston kind of with, and this photograph just captures Sonny Liston to me. It's a 66 Panini
Okay.
release, and it shows him with kind of his boxing hood over his head, just kind of peeking out, sort of like this, right? With
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
very like deep, intense look on his face. That's a card that I would like to add to my collection someday. Neither are very expensive. You can land both in, low to mid grade, like that three range, right? Three, four range for like that 100, 100-ish bucks, $150, something like that.
Okay.
Not super pricey. I think the 66 even less. I think you can get a decent one of that for under 100 in those grades. But to me, if I'm taking just, obviously there's something, the more significant card is the 62 Swedish Record Journal card. No doubt about it. That's the rookie. That's the more recognizable one. But if you're asking me which one would I rather add to my collection, I want that 66 Panini, because that to me looks like what I think Sonny Liston should be represented as.
Yeah, I can literally picture him, man, like with the hood over his head, and you can just kind of see the silhouette of his face, and he's got like all sorts of padding over him, and he's just kind of
Hmm.
walking out to the ring with big
Yeah.
heavy gloves. Like, oh, man, he's a
It's a bad
scary
card.
man. He's a scary man, dude. That
Yeah,
sounds
he
awesome.
was.
I have seen, I did look at that Swedish card actually, and I was wondering, like, there are actually sports cards of rookies, like for example, like a Kylian Mbappe card. There's a company called Foot, and they had Mbappe with some other footballer who I've never heard of, who
Yeah,
probably in 15 years is going to be like, who's that guy? I don't know, unless you're a real football fan. But those, I think, if I were to get a Sunny Liston card, I would have to get the one with the other boxer with him,
I
not
agree.
just on his own. You just have to. It's like that's the way the card was made.
Yeah. And that's kind of, and that's why, and this is way out of left field, but whatever. I'm going to go there anyway. That's why
Yeah.
that, what year am I thinking that, the tops card, is it 80, the 80 Bird Magic Irving card with the three panels is so
Yes.
special.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
How
Yes.
often do you have a card with multi-players on it, multiple rookies on it?
That's
And
right.
oh, by the way, another Hall of Famer, right? They're that iconic. It's like that's
Yeah.
why that '80s tops card is so special in the hobby, because you think about it, right? There are, like, you look at in baseball, right? You have the '68 Nolan Ryan rookie with Jerry Koosman on there. It's like, who cares, Jerry? Right? But that '80 card with Bird, Magic, Irving, that's just so. One of the reasons that's so special is all the guys on there hit, and that just does
Yeah.
not happen very often.
Yeah. Well, they basically started doing that in the 90s, if you remember, with basketball cards as well. So
Hmm.
they started putting that on. I think it was like 97. They had like Kobe with Kevin Garnett and somebody else as well. So they have those mini cards as well. And 2003,
Oh,
they have, I want to say it's tops as well, but I might be wrong on
yeah,
this. But there's a LeBron rookie, and it's like
LeBron
LeBron,
Bosch.
Chris Bosh, and
Yeah.
Dwayne Wade. And I've
I
taken a
almost
look at
bought
them. It's
that
pretty
card a
cool.
couple years ago when I was still dabbling in basketball. That's a pretty cool card.
It's not a bad card to get, mate. I don't think you're going to lose on that one. I mean, all of those guys' careers have opened and closed, and they've had incredible Hall of Fame careers. All of them are in the halls. So,
Yeah.
well, LeBron isn't yet, because he's still
Still
playing.
going. Still going. Yeah, I have a hunch he will be, though. Just a
Yeah,
guess.
just
Maybe. He
just
might
again,
just make it.
maybe, unless they do a Pete Rose to him for some reason that we've never heard of yet. But I
Yeah,
highly doubt it. I highly doubt it.
I doubt it. So
All
let's
right, let
who's your
me.
last? I think your last
What
guy's connected to my last guy a little bit. Like,
is he?
yeah,
How so?
because Because Liston took the title off of
Oh, Floyd Patterson. Yeah, of course.
Floyd
Yeah.
Patterson. Yes, he
Yeah,
did.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good one. Yeah, so mine is Floyd Mayweather. And again, probably if we're looking at like strict bad boys, I think you
Mayweather.
definitely. So I think I don't know if he's is bad as much as he is just, I guess, a heel. I guess that's probably how I've been able to stretch mine a bit. And I don't know if he's been majorly bad, except for just like a little bit of controversial behavior, maybe some legal problems. Some of the stuff that he says, he's not very well liked. I've noticed. I mean, I think he's liked by a lot, but a lot of people kind of pay to probably watch him lose, and he always wins. I think he disappoints people. He's disappointed people a lot in his career. Anyway, Floyd, as we know, Money Mayweather is an iconic boxer for a number of different reasons. I think his self promotion is something that people like or don't like. You see a lot of the video of him and his dad and his family, and I don't know, like I found that the boxing brand that they started to kind of build with like Broner and other boxers is just like I don't think a lot of people liked it. At least I didn't like it. I didn't think that it appealed to a lot of boxing purists. I remember Mike Tyson basically saying, "Well, if you are the baddest man of the planet, if you're the greatest boxer of all time, you should be able to walk out on the street and not have 4 or 5 bodyguards around you."
Mm.
Which I thought was an amazing quote. Like when you think about someone like Muhammad Ali, he wouldn't need a bodyguard. He just wants someone to just like kind of almost keep them safe, like he's just like he's beloved by people. Mike Tyson, even the same. Like Tyson probably has security around him, but I'm not in the way that someone like Floyd probably would in terms of being fearful of being attacked by people.
Tyson had security around him, so he didn't like have somebody come up and then Tyson go to jail for beating the person who comes up to him. Would be my guess. I think Tyson has
Probably.
security for other people's protection.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, I started looking at Floyd's cards and basically ran into a lot of the same problems. The brands that produced cards of his were not really well recognized within the hobby, and so you can pick up his vintage PSA 7 rookie card. It's a 1997 Browns card, a PSA 7 rookie card of an all-time great, an undefeated boxer, for $130.
Oh
You
wow.
can you can pick up an auto of that card, like in like PSA 8, PSA 7, PSA 9, for around $300 to $350. So he's really kind of signing a lot of stuff, I think.
Yeah.
Doing a lot of signing, probably to kind of keep up his lavish lifestyle. So, looking at his career in general and looking at the cards of his in general, there aren't many that I would consider iconic just because they're not from brands that we would recognize. Maybe in 100 years' time, these cards might come back in vogue. But I don't think so. I just
Mhm.
don't think he's going to be a guy that we're going to be looking at like a Jack Johnson. I don't think
Yeah.
he's going to be a guy that we're going to be looking at like a Mike Tyson. He's definitely culturally relevant, which is why his cards do sell for a good amount of money, but they have to be a certain type. For example, in 2017, there were 2 different types of cards that they had. One, I'm not sure if you know about this, but if you went to the National in 2017, you got a goodie bag. And in that goodie bag, you got a leaf card of
Really?
Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor basically facing off on it.
Really?
That's right. And
That's
in
actually
that
pretty cool.
I think it's great. And in that, within those, you had a chance of pulling an out of 5 auto card of those, and it was a sticker auto, but for each fighter, which I thought was fantastic. So, however much money that card could go for, could be pretty impressive because I think the connection to the national is pretty awesome.
That is pretty
So,
cool. Have we
in
ever
that
seen one
same
sell?
year, I haven't seen any sales. I couldn't find any.
I don't think so.
But I think that would be maybe one of his absolutely most expensive
Mhm.
cards because his rookie card being signed so often, you're not going to get a really high value on that. Maybe
Right.
a PSA 10 of that, but even that would be a couple of grand. Whereas this one, number to 5, man,
Yeah.
and with a moment in time like that fight, earned those 2 boatloads of money, so much money. And so that being connected to the national is pretty cool. I think that one would sell for a
That's
bunch of
awesome.
money.
Yeah. I didn't know about the existence of that. That's really cool.
Nor me until I researched. I was like, whoa, what is this? On top of that, there's another card in 2017 as well. It's an Allen and Ginter card, and that I think is also low numbered. I couldn't find any sales on that one as well. But that one I think would sell for pretty good money, more so than the rookie card. On top of that, I'd say the last thing is when we look at the last 30 years of not really having a dedicated set of cards to boxing, that's where this Topps Chrome set and where this Panini set of fighting cards, of boxing cards, combat sports cards, really do become important to collectors now. And those Mayweather cards are selling for less than the Tyson cards, but they're selling for a few $100. So I think his auto, now that I've looked into it, you can pick up a card with his autograph on it, even if it's an on-card auto, one of those DNA certified ones, where it says like 40-0, or
Mhm.
heavyweight champion of the world. Champion of the world. Did he win more than one weight class? I can't remember.
I think so, but don't quote me on that.
Okay, but he's inscribed a whole bunch of those cards as well, so you can find those as well online. But you could pay around $300. I think you'd get his autograph for. So not as scarce as I thought it was before I started looking into it. And I think at the same time, like, it's so easy to find his autos out there that I'm not going to be chasing after them. And if I do, I'm going to be asking way under comps because he's not my favorite boxer.
Well, and that's kind of nice sometimes, though, where when people sign a lot, it's like, yeah, okay, the value's not there, but for collectors, right?
That's
There's
right.
something in
That's
for that
right.
because you can
That's
pick
right.
up something for a lower price. I know, if we our year end recap we're going to try to do here in a month. I've started a different adventure in my other areas of collecting where I've been surprised how cheaply I can find certain autos of certain all time greats in football. And it's like, because there's
Amazing.
just people that, sign a lot, and it's, and that's nice for collectors. I don't need, I don't always want the autos to be, super valuable because then I can't afford them. So
Yeah, very
it's
true.
nice when you have that option. Now, I totally messed up, by the way. I thought you said Floyd Patterson. I looked back. I'm like, you just said Floyd. I interpreted Floyd Patterson. So I guess that's where my mind went
Uh-huh.
because I was on the list. I'm like, oh wow, what? That's because there's
It's
so
a
I
very
could.
rare one to pull out, and then you're like, "Oh, Mayweather, yeah, don't like him
Yeah,
very
well,
much."
yeah, because yeah. So right when you said Mayweather, I'm like, oh man, Patterson. But yeah, because that's why I said that about the Liston connection. I think that's why I was
That's
thinking that
fine.
because once I had Liston on my mind, I'm like, oh wow, there's a connection there. But maybe we'll chalk
Yeah,
that up.
gotcha. I gotcha. I got no, no, no need. Let's leave it in. Like, I mean, I think his win over Floyd Patterson needs to be remembered as well. Like, Floyd Patterson was not a scrub. He was an
No,
incredible champion, great boxer. Obviously, Ali beat him as well, but
yeah,
that's not why he's remembered. He's remembered as being a former heavyweight champion of the world,
yeah.
and he was an incredible boxer in his time.
So
How about we wrap up with, actually, we're going to be doing an episode next week where we're going to be doing some Q&A questions. But there was a boxing question that came up
mhm.
just recently, and you've just told me that it's from your friend. Who is your friend, by the way?
Bernard, yeah, he.
Okay.
Hopefully, we're going to get him on the channel at some point. It was funny because he talked about maybe going on during the summer, and then he got busy with life, and then he came back to me. What was it? I think he came back to me maybe like October 20th or something, and said, "Hey, I'm got some time now. I'm ready to go. When can we jump on?" And I'm like, "Might be a little bit for me. We just had a baby, so hopefully, sometime January, February, we'll get Bernard
Perfect.
on here." Great boxing collection, even better hockey collection. He's a really cool guy, but he is the person who asked this boxing question. I'm excited that we're going to tackle it and talk about it a little bit today.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I think we have to. And when you guys do listen in on the Bernard and Justin episode, at least you'll have someone who knows something about boxing. Me, I'm just a, I'm just a, I'm just a
No,
fan
you
from
pull
the
out some
outside.
good stuff. You've got that 80s, 90s boxing that I don't, quite frankly. I don't have the same knowledge you do on that era. So I think it's a good balance.
Thanks, man. So Bernard asks, could boxing cards make a comeback into the mainstream, or are they basically going to be, or continue to be, a niche in the card collecting market? What do you think, mate?
I think that so the most likely outcome, and I'll explain kind of the path to a different outcome, but I think the most likely outcome is that they are able to become a larger niche, right?
There you
In
go.
other words, I don't know that. So, in order for boxing cards to become part of the mainstream to me, right? Popularity of the sport isn't always an indicator of, exactly
Collectability.
how, like, the rank of how popular a sport is and the rank of how popular a sport is in collecting isn't always identical, but it is a
Mhm.
pretty good proxy for it being mainstream or not. And what do I mean by that? So what's the most popular sport by far in America right now? It's football. Easily football,
Mhm.
right? It's not even particularly close. NFL is the most popular. And in modern collecting, that correlates, right? Modern football cards are more popular than, basketball, baseball, hockey, whatever else. So
Really?
much so, in fact, that I went to my local card shop. During my parental leave, my month I was off, I was able to kind of go through my cards a bit and say, okay, here's some stuff I could sell and move, and I knew my local card shop. My guy there had said, hey, we need some, like, $1 to $20 cards for our, live auctions. And I'm like, cool, I've got all you can handle. So I went in there with baseball, basketball, and football, and he just pushed the basketball and baseball aside and said, only football sells. He's like, I lose money on basketball and
Wow.
baseball. So yeah, he bought up
Wow.
everything, all my football stuff that I brought in. Didn't want anything to do with, even, and there were like Kate Cunningham rookies and then nothing. Didn't want to do anything to do with it.
Wow.
So in modern sports that tracks, but if you go to vintage, right, even though football is the most popular sport in America, vintage baseball is by far the most popular avenue of collecting there. So it's not always directly correlated, but there does have to be, I think, a certain level of popularity of the sport in general for that sport to really take hold in any level in terms of mainstream collecting. And right now, boxing just still isn't quite there. I think it has grown a bit. I think we were saying before we jumped on here that in the last, if we were sitting here in 2021, I think boxing is more popular now than it was then, because there have been some, bigger ticket fights, bigger names. As much as it wasn't the most exciting fight to watch, like Jake Paul, Mike Tyson, I think brought people, at least for a minute, into, paying some attention to boxing and whatnot. So, but I just, at this moment, right, I don't see boxing as having that widespread appeal, enough so that enough people are going to get into it, learn the names, learn the fighters, and start jumping in and collecting those guys, right? Because I think where boxing's bread and butter really is, and most of the boxing collectors I know actually kind of, almost all the boxing collectors I know, the bread and butter of boxing cards is vintage boxing, right?
Mhm.
So what I do see is, because I jumped into this a couple years ago, and in the couple years I've been in the vintage boxing hobby, I have seen that grow a bit. I have seen, the numbers in my Facebook groups grow a bit. I see, people reaching out to me about Jack Johnson cards. More excitement surrounding that. Even on mainstream YouTube, guys like, James at Elite Hunters, Jay, Average Vintage Collector. I just encountered him for the first time recently. Cool guy. They do some boxing in their collections along with baseball, right? So I'm seeing more of that, seeing more interest in boxing. Like when I'll post a comment or a question on YouTube channels about boxing cards, people seem more interested. When I jump on vintage football channel, my buddy Lefty Groveland's channel, and the conversation shifts to boxing. Right, people in the chat seem to get more interested. Other guys that are on the stream with me tend to jump in and say, "Oh yeah, Jack Johnson cards, that's cool." So I'm seeing more of that, and that's evidence to me that the niche is growing and we have more interest in boxing cards, particularly, kind of vintage boxing cards, and particularly Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson seems to me like, when you talk about guys that people are targeting in boxing, he seems like, the guy at the National that everybody knows. Even tables that don't have a ton of boxing cards sometimes have a Jack Johnson or two sitting there. So I do see a growth in the niche from that perspective, as to where, it's the niche community is becoming bigger, but will boxing cards become mainstream? I think that's contingent on boxing itself growing in popularity. And right now, I don't know that I see the avenue to that. To be perfectly honest, I think it's going to take somebody with that, like, Tyson esque persona, or, that Ali esque charisma, jumping in there and maybe drawing people's attention to the boxing world. But I think too, right? I don't know, and this is why I'd be interested in your take. Fanatics, right, trying to 10x the hobby, so on and so forth, and that's included a lot more of a global marketing outreach. I don't know if boxing is more popular in other parts of the world, to the point where maybe boxing becomes more mainstream through growth outside the United States. I don't know if that's an option. You could probably maybe speak to that better than I could. But as far as my perspective sitting here, I think the niche can continue to grow, but because there's some really cool stuff in the boxing card world, but I don't know if it can quite get to the point of being mainstream unless boxing itself becomes more popular.
I've got a couple more contingencies to add to that. I agree with pretty
I'm
much everything
interested to
you have to
hear
say
it.
on that. So I've been collecting certain cards from niches in the card collecting market for quite a long time. Rugby cards, cricket cards, absolute niches in the market. And one of the things that needs to happen, I think, for a niche to become more mainstream is survival, first of all. So boxing was something as these cigarette cards because there's this history, there's this gravitas, there's this long amount. Every other year we're going to be having a boxing card. We can find boxing
Mhm.
cards all up until the way until like young Ali, and then we kind of made a stretch with that Mike Tyson Panini card that we were talking about.
Mm.
But when you look at the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s and 2010s, all the way up until 2024, there haven't been any kind of standout boxing card sets.
Mhm.
There have been people like Leaf who are like, boxing is a good enough niche where if we get Mike Tyson and Floyd Mayweather and Tyson Fury and we put them on a card and they sign it, we'll be able to sell some because we can market the player rather than the sport.
Mm.
That worked out quite well. What ended up happening with rugby cards, for example, is if these companies don't arrange the sets properly or they have these big expectations, a lot of them have basically come up, had these peaks, and then after a couple of years, they've all gone and disappeared, and there's no more rugby cards anymore. And so now, basically, there are companies that are following Leaf's example and taking the icons of rugby and putting them into a multi-sport set. But in terms of there being a rugby card set, uh, Fanatics literally got the licensing to the All
Mm.
Blacks
Interesting.
about 2 years ago now, and they've done nothing.
Hmm.
So
I didn't even
it's
know
not
that.
very promising. It's not very promising in that sense. So with boxing, I think that top set and the Panini set are both really encouraging signs. It's whether or not those cards can continue to sell
Mhm.
and for that market to be able to stay steady. Otherwise, what happens if Tops decides, you know what, we didn't really earn that much money on the boxing cards, and so we're out
Yeah.
next year. And who wants to collect the second year card of these guides anymore? We've kind of the novelty of it all is gone.
Mhm.
So there is a real worry that there's not going to be a series two of this top set. I don't know.
Good
Is there going
point.
to be a 2025 set? I'm not sure. And I think if they want to be able to hit the mainstream, people will need to understand we're going to be getting a new release set. This new set's coming out with these really cool inserts, but it's going to be tricky for them to be able to do that with boxing. What are they going to do with next year's set? It's not like a basketball
Good
season
point.
where you're a champion one year and then the next year,
Mm.
who's going to be the champion? You don't know. There's a new rookie class coming in every year.
Mm.
With boxing, there will be rookie cards of boxers who are just coming into it, but it's really hard, I think, for boxing to be able to survive in many ways. So there's a lot that needs to go right for it to become mainstream. I'm definitely pleased that they have a top set, but I'm pretty dubious about whether or not that's going to survive long term. I
Yeah.
don't want to be a doom and gloom guy, but just on the evidence of looking at other niche sports that haven't made it and looking at the nature of what boxing is versus something like baseball, which has every
Yeah.
season, new set, there's going to be a brand new Donruss set coming out. There's going to be a brand new finest set coming out, whatever it is. You just can't say that for boxing. You don't really know. It doesn't have that history anymore. It's been 75 years since we've had a set of boxing cards.
But I do think at the same time, there's enough, you know, in terms of vintage, there is enough, good stuff in boxing, enough iconic figures, great cards, and the price point is still very, very affordable. That
Mm-hmm.
when and again, I've talked to general vintage collectors about this who have ended up picking up or getting into boxing cards a bit, picking up a few boxing cards here and there, right? Like once general vintage collectors start to see, oh wow, there are some really important figures here. These guys are interesting. Start to learn a little bit about it. See kind of how cool the design is for some of these pre-war boxing cards. I guess what I'm saying is there's enough breadth and depth in the vintage boxing world to keep the collecting of the sport alive, right? But I
Yes.
think, in order for it to, grow out of something other than a substantive niche, I agree with everything you're saying. Well, there needs to be some excitement. There needs to be an avenue for modern collectors to get in and stay in, right? Because without that, it's going to continue to be, a niche of vintage collectors that are chasing down, stuff that is, not contingent on, sets coming out year after year and that sort of thing. So, and I think that's honestly where it's gonna land. And I don't see doom and gloom to that, because I honestly like boxing as being sort of a niche. I like it when the niche
100%.
grows. But the cool
Hmm.
thing about it is, again, the community for, boxing cards is unmatched in terms of being welcoming and just being, really cool, and just no drama, no trolls, nothing like that. It's just like a whole lot of really cool people that are interested in boxing cards. And, sometimes when things expand too far, you lose a little bit of that, that vibe. So I don't know. Like, I would say that for me, I don't know that I see everything happening for it to become mainstream, but I also think I'm kind of okay with that, because I'm okay with the nature of the community as it is, if that makes sense.
That's fair. That's fair. You know what I would actually like? I would like for Tops to release a super high end set of boxing cards.
That would be
Where,
cool. I think they could,
where
but once they sure it's going to be profitable, though, they have to see if there's enough interest.
well, I think if pretty much every card is numbered, so like your
Hmm.
most card, your biggest numbering could be the 99. Then you could do something National Treasures esque. I don't know what the Tops version of that's going to be, but I think that would have enough of an audience, enough of a niche audience where they could make money out of it, and they could do something that could literally be sustainable. So every year, or every 3 years, every 5 years, they repeatedly release a
That's
set of
actually a
boxing
very
cards
cool
like that.
idea.
Oh, I should probably run
Yeah, I was going to say,
my.
can you market that?
All right, man. I think we can leave it there. We've been chatting along for a long time, and I know you have things to do and enjoying your Saturday.
Yeah, no, yeah, man, this has been great. Yeah, gotta do a bit of parenting, and then at noon here in the states, we got the Ohio State Michigan game. I'm repping that big game today, so
Good luck,
yeah,
man.
so it'll be, yeah, a good time. But man, thanks for letting me jump on. This has been a lot of fun to get back and talk some boxing, and yeah, just always good to catch up with you, man.
Enjoy it, buddy. We'll talk soon.
All right, man, talk soon. Bye.
See ya.